candidates. Firstly, I'll talk about the vaccine basics. What do vaccines do? They instruct the immune system to mount a specific defense to the SARS-CoV virus in a safe way. An inactive form of the disease is introduced to the body. The body creates antibodies to defend itself, and these antibodies then work to destroy any occurrence of the live or active disease. There are several hundred COVID-19 vaccines currently under development worldwide, and the European Commission has approved contract with 6 of these vaccines. These include a Sanofi GSK vaccine, which uses traditional or established vaccine technology, genetic or Pfizer, BioNTech, and Mrna and CureVac vaccines, which are genetic or mRNA vaccines, and AstraZeneca, Oxford, and Janssen vaccines, which are viral vector vaccines using adenovirus. As of December 20, there are 4 vaccines under active assessment: Pfizer, BioNTech, Mrna, AstraZeneca, and Janssen. And the EMA will provide updates on future vaccine developments on their website. The genetic vaccines include Pfizer, BioNTech, or Mrna, and these contain genetic instructions in the form of DNA or messenger RNA to make an immune response against the coronavirus. They contain lipid nanoparticles which prevent degradation of the genetic material. Their development is rapid and cost efficient. A challenge is the requirement for ultra-low temperature storage. Viral vector vaccines include that being developed by AstraZeneca, Oxford. In this case, a modified, harmless virus, such as an adenovirus, is engineered to carry genetic instructions for making an immune response against the coronavirus. There are replication competent vaccines and replication incompetent vaccines, and the AstraZeneca Oxford virus is a replication incompetent vaccine, where the vaccine is used to infect cells and cause them to make viral proteins and provoke the immune response. No adjuvant is needed for these vaccines, and that is in contrast to the traditional platform vaccines. Their development is complex and time-consuming, and they do require low-temperature storage. I just want to return again to the conditional marketing authorization and the data that will be provided for COVID-19 vaccines. The basic suite of studies will be the same as for other medicines. There will be at least one very large pivotal trial demonstrating a reduction in COVID-19 disease in adults, including those with comorbidities and those above 65 years. There will be safety data up to 6 weeks post-vaccination, and this is because most adverse drug reactions occur within 4 to 6 weeks of vaccination. There are currently some uncertainties regarding the long-term protection and community transmission. But these data will become available over the life cycle of the vaccine. The product information that will be published on the EMA website will contain these initial efficacy and safety data, and will also detail the conditions and specific obligations under the conditional marketing authorization. The specific obligations will include long-term follow-up of study participants, assessment of safety and effectiveness of vaccines during vaccination campaigns, and requirements to update the product information. The pharmacovigilance monitoring plan, whereby new information is collected and promptly reviewed and product information updated, will also be part of the conditional marketing authorization. So, the conditional marketing authorization. At the outset, the benefit risk of the vaccine will be positive. New data will be promptly reviewed and the product information updated to take account of this new data, resulting in an ongoing positive benefit risk assessment. The vaccination process for COVID-19, or I should say the authorization process for COVID-19 vaccines, is robust. There is pooling of EU expertise. There is stringent scientific evaluation. There is a rolling review of data to enable fast approval. And through the conditional marketing authorization, there are strong safeguards in place. There are quality checks on batches prior to release, and post-approval monitoring and product information updates. Access to vaccine information is primarily through the European Medicines Agency, and on their website you will find the European Public Assessment Report, the product information, including the SMPC or Summary Product Characteristics, the package leaflet and label, the conditions, restrictions and specific obligations, and these will be updated regularly as new information comes to light. We will also provide regular updates and information on vaccines on our website. This is where you can find information on the EMA medicines page. You type the name of the vaccine in here to produce the assessment report and the other information that I've referred to. And this is the HPRA Medicines and Vaccines COVID-19 webpage. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please contact us at info@hpra.ie.
Participate together with other EU agencies in safety monitoring coordinated by the EMA. The objective of this training module is to ensure healthcare professionals involved in the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccination programme are aware of the importance of reporting suspected adverse reactions to the HPRA and the reasons why this is particularly so for COVID-19 vaccines. The topics included in the module cover how the safety of vaccines is studied from the development stage to use in real life, why we need to monitor the safety of vaccines post-approval, who does safety monitoring in the EU, how suspected adverse reactions for COVID-19 vaccines will be evaluated by HPRA and EMA, how and who can report a suspected adverse reaction, and we'll also finish with signposting to further regulated information on the safety profile of COVID-19 vaccines. Before we go into the module itself, some abbreviations that I want to highlight as they may be used regularly throughout. The HPRA and the EMA, or EMA, European Medicines Agency, you will likely be familiar with. ADR is the abbreviation for adverse drug reaction or adverse reaction. ADR has the same meaning as an adverse event following immunization, or an AFI. PV is the abbreviation for pharmacovigilance. EV is EudraVigilance, the EU database which houses suspected adverse reactions reported by national agencies and vaccine manufacturers. Medicines and vaccines are used interchangeably throughout, as in the EU, the same regulatory framework is applied. MAH is the marketing authorization holder or the license holder, also commonly referred to as vaccine manufacturer. This overview slide essentially represents the development path of COVID-19 vaccine candidates through the different classical stages from initial pharmaceutical testing through to non-clinical and then phase 1, 2 and 3 human clinical trials. You will see with the red box on the right-hand side that the focus of this training is on safety monitoring, with a particular focus upon the on-market safety monitoring that follows approval. For further information on the development, evaluation and approval of vaccines, please refer to the HPRA module delivered by Dr. Elaine Breslin. In this slide, I want to touch on the EU regulatory network and how it coordinates benefit-risk evaluation to support regulatory decisions on medicines, including at the time of their approval, but also thereafter when there is continued close monitoring. In the EU, the evaluation of benefit and risk of a medicine is undertaken by scientific experts from medicines agencies, including the HPRA, who work together under the auspice of the heads of medicines agencies, or HMA. The EMA acts as a coordinator of the pooled scientific expertise, and together this is known as the EU regulatory network. Through this network, an independent evaluation of all data on quality, safety and efficacy is performed, which is itself underpinned by robust EU pharmaceutical legislation. The EU's pharmaceutical legislation ensures that medicines are only approved after scientific evaluation has demonstrated that their overall benefits outweigh their risks, and a vaccine's benefits in protecting people against COVID-19 must be far greater than any potential risks. Why do we need post-market or on-market safety monitoring following approval of a medicine? Well, as you know, all medicines, including vaccines, have both benefits. This is from extent. See what we call the pharmacovigilance health systems, who play a
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Kenneth Beattie, one of the doctors in the HSE's National Immunisation Office, and I'm here today to talk through Module 2, which will describe it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Kenneth Beattie, one of the doctors in the HSE's National Immunisation Office, and I'm here today to talk through Module 2, which will describe some clinical trial data and vaccine recommendations relating to the Commonality or Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. Just a brief overview of this presentation. Firstly, we'll describe the clinical trial data for the Commonality Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. List some contraindications and precautions, discuss some clinical considerations, and outline some adverse events that have been recorded. Firstly, the advantages of mRNA vaccines, of which the Commonality vaccine is one, include high potency, the ability for rapid development, a cost-efficient production, the fact that no viral vector is required, the fact that the RNA degrades rapidly, and that it does not alter the host's genome. I'll now outline some of the Phase 3 trial results, which studied trial participants aged 16 and older who received 2 doses of the Commonality vaccine. As we can see in the graphic below, in the Phase 3 trial, 18,198 trial participants received 2 doses of the vaccine, while 18,325 trial participants received 2 doses of placebo. The vaccine efficacy measurement was the occurrence of COVID-19 disease from 7 days after the second dose was administered. When we look at the table below, we see that in participants who received 2 doses of the Commonality vaccine, 8 cases of symptomatic COVID-19 were recorded, of which 1 case was recorded as severe COVID-19, while in the placebo group, 162 symptomatic COVID-19 infections were recorded, of which 9 were recorded as severe COVID-19 infection. This gave a vaccine efficacy rate of 95%, and the efficacy was similar in all age groups. I'll now discuss some of the adverse events that were reported in the clinical trials, and these events were reported from 21,744 vaccine recipients during Phase 2 and Phase 3 trials. As you can see in the table, the most commonly reported adverse events included pain at the injection site, fatigue, headache, myalgia or muscle pain and chills, arthralgia or bone pain, high temperature, and injection site swelling. Other less commonly reported adverse events included nausea, lymphadenopathy, and acute peripheral facial paralysis. Adverse events were more commonly reported after the second dose than after the first dose. They were more commonly reported in younger recipients than in older recipients. They were usually mild or moderate in intensity for its efficacy. Some information around the dosage and interval. Doses of no further dosage dose at whatever requiring medical intervention. Some precautions around using the Commonality vaccine. In patients who have an acute severe febrile illness, it is advised to defer vaccination until the patient has recovered, although there is no need to check that patient's temperature. Commonality is not contraindicated for those with persisting post-COVID-19 symptoms. However, vaccine symptoms in patients who were symptomatic, or for 4 weeks from the first PCR positive specimen in persons who were asymptomatic. Some information relating to Commonality COVID-19 vaccine and pregnancy of COVID-19 vaccination with their obstetrician or GP. It is advised that vaccination is not commenced before 14 weeks gestation and that it is completed by 36 weeks gestation. And this is as a precaution to minimize any possible association with miscarriage or differential diagnosis of post-vaccination pyrexia. Commonality COVID-19 vaccine can be given to women who are breastfeeding as per their priority group. It is advised consulting a supervising consultant for those patients with thrombocytopenia, that is a platelet count of less than 50 by 10 to the 9 per litre. Regarding hemostatic cover requirements, this is not needed for patients with mild bleeding disorders or for those on maintenance dose emicizumab, known as Hemlibra. On anticoagulants. Technique for intramuscular injections in persons with bleeding disorders or those on anticoagulants is listed in the link below. For Commonality use in children, this vaccine is currently recommended for use in persons aged 16 years of age and older, and there is limited data on the safety and efficacy. No data are currently available to establish vaccine safety and efficacy in these groups. Patients with immunosuppression due to disease or to treatment they may be on can be vaccinated provided they have no contraindications to the vaccine. In patients who have planned immunosuppressive therapy, it is advised that the vaccination should be completed 2 weeks before treatment. So can Commonality vaccine be co-administered with other vaccines? This has not been studied. Currently, the advice is to leave an interval of 14 days between a COVID-19 vaccine and the administration of another vaccine. Commonality COVID-19 vaccine should not be used to complete a course of another COVID-19 vaccine. So some adverse events that have been reported regarding the Commonality vaccine and its use in the general population. So over 98 million doses have been administered at a rate of clinical trials are ongoing to determine the overall length of protection from the vaccine. It's important that the vaccinee is informed that they may not be protected until 7 days after the second dose, and that they should follow all current public health guidance, including hand washing, social distancing, and wearing of face coverings to protect themselves and others.
Virus. It contains a vector, which is a chimpanzee adenovirus. The learning outcomes for this module are to obtain an understanding of the following issues: the clinical trial data, dosage and intervals, contraindications and precautions, adverse events, and special considerations. Vaxzevria is a viral vector vaccine. It does not contain live coronavirus. It contains a vector, which is a chimpanzee adenovirus, which cannot multiply or spread in the body, and it's harmless. The vector is used as a way to deliver the gene for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And the vaccine stimulates neutralizing antibody and cellular immune responses, thus providing protection against COVID-19. The vaccine was first licensed in the UK in December of last year and in the EU in January 2021. And it's licensed for the active immunization to prevent COVID-19 in individuals aged 18 years of age and older. In the trial data that was presented to the EMA in January, the vaccine efficacy was estimated at 59.5%. This was against confirmed disease of any type. So this was not serious of severe COVID-19 disease, but COVID-19 disease. And at that time, there was limited data in older people. When the vaccine was first licensed, because there was limited data in older people, NIAC recommended the preferential use of an mRNA vaccine, an alternative vaccine, in those aged 70 and older. Subsequent to that, WHO reviewed additional data on the vaccine in February and confirmed that the overall efficacy was 63.1%. But they also pointed out that there was data on the use of the vaccine in older people, and particularly in those who had been vaccinated who were 65 and older. There were no cases of COVID-19 hospitalization, 0 cases of severe COVID-19 disease, and 0 cases of death relating to COVID, to demonstrate the fact that the vaccine is highly efficacious in those 65 and older in preventing severe disease. Looking at the adverse events reported from the trial, the majority were the commonly seen local adverse events seen after any injection. That would be tenderness, pain, occasional headache, fatigue, pains and aches, myalgia, malaise, temperature, mild temperature, pains in the joints, and nausea. These occurred more frequently after the first dose compared to the second dose of vaccine. This is a 2-dose vaccine schedule and occurs more commonly in younger than older people. They're usually mild or moderate in intensity and resolve within a few days of vaccination. Other adverse events that were less common were redness at the site of the injection and swelling, diarrhea and vomiting, decreased appetite, dizziness, hyperhidrosis, injection site hematoma, lymphadenopathy, pruritus, and somnolence. And these were the adverse events that were seen in the trials. Since the vaccine has been licensed and millions of doses have been given, there have been cases reported to the EMA of serious rare thromboembolic events with thrombocytopenia. So they are not the mainstream clotting events that you may see in general population. These are associated particularly with low platelet counts. The EMA in April of this year reviewed 62 cases of cerebral venous sinus thrombosis and 24 cases of splanchnic venous thrombosis, all with thrombocytopenia. And they occurred mostly within 14 days after vaccination, were more frequently seen in women under 60 years of age. And originally it was assumed that that may be because there had been more female healthcare workers vaccinated because more healthcare workers are female. When the UK looked at this data, they found that adjusting for the vaccination rates by age and by sex, that there was no difference in the incidence of these conditions in men and women. The EMA estimated that these events occur between 4 and 10 cases per million people vaccinated. At that stage, 25 million people had received the AstraZeneca vaccine. And of those 4 to 10 cases, 1 death occurred of those cases, so that gives an estimated rate of death of 1 death per million cases. There was no evidence of an increased risk in those with any pre-existing thrombosis or thrombocytopenic history, but the EMA could not rule out a causal association between these events and the administration of the first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine. Because of this possible link, they have made changes to the license documentation. They have added in 2 further adverse events. The first is asymptomatic thrombocytopenia. This is seen in a common occurrence after the vaccine, and this was seen in the serology testing in clinical trials. Because of any symptoms of a thrombocytopenia, and it was found as a chance event after the clinical trials, but of no clinical significance. However, they also added the link of a thrombosis in combination with thrombocytopenia as a very rare adverse event of the AstraZeneca, the Vaxzevria vaccine. Nevertheless, in spite of this being a very rare adverse event, the EMA still continue to say that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh the risks. This is a very rare adverse event, and the vaccine is safe for those for whom it is recommended. If we look at the incidence of thromboembolic events compared to the incidence or the likelihood of death from COVID-19 disease, you can see from this table that there is very much an association with age. We know that the rate of death from COVID-19 disease increases with age. The incidence of these adverse clotting events with thrombocytopenia, we're not sure at this time, the evidence is unclear as to whether there is a differential by age. Nevertheless, what we do know is that the rate of COVID-19 disease, the deaths from COVID-19, increase with age, such that it has been estimated that a person of 60 to 64 has an 85 times greater likelihood of death from COVID versus having one of these thromboses with thrombocytopenic events. This compares with a rate of twice for those aged 20 to 34. So you can see very clearly that there is a differential in the risk profile by age. NIAC looked at this risk profile, that's the National Immunization Advisory Committee, and as alternative COVID-19 vaccines are available, they revised the recommendations for the use of this vaccine in April of 2021. The recommendations are as follows. Vaxzevria is recommended for those aged 60 and older, including anyone with a medical condition with a very high risk or high risk of severe COVID disease. So everybody 60 and older, the vaccine is recommended for. The vaccine is not recommended for those under 60 years of age, including those with medical conditions with very high or high risk of severe disease, because there are alternative vaccines. However, the vaccine can be given to those under 60 where the benefits outweigh the risks. For example, if the mRNA vaccines are contraindicated, then it is much better that that person receives a COVID vaccine to prevent them from developing the serious adverse effects from the disease. The contraindications to this vaccine are anaphylaxis following a previous dose of the vaccine or any of its constituents. and the vaccine includes polysorbate 80, which is contained in some other vaccines. Anaphylaxis is defined as a serious systemic allergic reaction requiring medical intervention. A second dose of Vaxzevria should not be given to anyone who developed thromboembolism with thrombocytopenia after their first dose. The precautions, as always, for any vaccine, somebody with an acute severe febrile illness, you should defer until recovery. There's no need to check a person's temperature when they present. You merely ask them, do they feel well? If so, you give the vaccine. If they feel unwell, you may defer until they have recovered. For somebody with a history of an immediate allergic reaction to any other vaccine or injectable therapy, you should seek advice from a relevant specialist before giving vaccination to them. The vaccine is not contraindicated for those with persisting post-COVID-19 symptoms, that's long COVID, unless they have had a recent clinical deterioration. As always, there should be precautions in place to minimize any injury from fainting and appropriate support in case of anaphylaxis or fainting after vaccine administration. For somebody who has previously had COVID-19 disease, you should defer vaccination until their clinical recovery, at least 4 weeks after their diagnosis or onset of symptoms, or 4 weeks from the first PCR positive specimen if they were asymptomatic. A person who's under 65 years of age, and who is not immunocompromised, you may consider deferring their COVID-19 vaccine for up to 6 months after diagnosis, symptom onset, or from the first PCR or antigen positive specimen. This is because that there is evidence to show that the person who is under 65 and not immunocompromised will maintain antibodies to COVID-19 disease as a result of the infection for up to 6 months. So that is why that group is recommended. The vaccine may be deferred. The vaccine comes in a multi-dose clear glass vial, and if more than 10 doses can be safely and accurately withdrawn, they can be used as valid doses. There's no latex and no preservative in the vaccine. 2 doses are required, and the vaccine is given intramuscularly with a recommended interval of 8 to 12 weeks. The vaccine should be given, as we've said, intramuscularly, and protection starts from about 3 weeks after the first dose. It has been shown that there has been a 76% reduction in the risk of symptomatic COVID-19 disease for up to 12 weeks after the 3 weeks after the first dose of vaccine. There's no evidence of waning of protection in the first 3 months of vaccination. And the vaccine efficacy increased to 82% when the second dose was given after 12 weeks. The second dose interval, the efficacy has been shown to be higher when the interval is longer. So that is why the HSE has determined that the interval should be 12 weeks between doses. The minimum interval between doses is actually 24 days. The vaccine may be given between 4 and 12 weeks, and so the minimum interval is 4 days less than that using the routine 4-day rule. If somebody by chance has a vaccine that the second dose is given less than 24 days after the first, no further dose is needed, but you should inform the vaccinee that they have been given their vaccine at an interval that is less than the minimum interval. If somebody is given a vaccine between 24 and 27 days after the first dose, no further action is needed because there is evidence from the trial data that this is a valid vaccine. Somebody given a vaccine after 12 weeks, you should give their second dose at whatever interval. You do not need to restart the course. and there is evidence of the immunity maintained for up to 20 weeks, as per the trial data. For those who have already received a first dose of Vaxzevria prior to the change in the recommendations where Vaxzevria has been recommended just for those 60 and older, there are different scenarios. Everybody who is 60 and older can continue with the routine interval of 12 weeks between doses. Those who are under 60, who have a very high or high-risk medical condition, should receive their second dose at 12 weeks as planned. Somebody under 60 years of age who is healthy, the interval has been extended to 16 weeks between the two doses to allow further assessment of the benefits and risks of the vaccine until more evidence becomes available. This includes any pregnant woman who may have received the vaccine, a first dose of the vaccine. If somebody has planned immunosuppressive therapy, it is recommended that the vaccine interval can be shorter. It can be as small as 4 weeks, or even using the minimum interval as previously stated, 24 days, to allow them to receive the best benefit from the vaccine. We know that those who are immunosuppressed have a lesser response to the vaccine. So we want to give them the benefit of the vaccine, of the second dose of the vaccine, because we also know that they have a higher risk of adverse effects from COVID-19 disease. So the minimum interval may be used for this group in particular. In regards to pregnancy, breastfeeding, and fertility, there's limited experience of this vaccine in pregnant women. However, animal studies do not indicate direct or indirect harmful effects. Since the new recommendations have been made, this vaccine is not recommended for pregnant or breastfeeding women, as alternative vaccines are available. There's no data on human fertility, but animal studies do not indicate any harmful effects. And there's no biologically plausible reason why any COVID-19 vaccine would affect fertility. In relation to somebody who has a bleeding disorder, you should inform them that they may develop a hematoma at the injection site. You should consult their supervising consultant for somebody who has thrombocytopenia. And hemostatic cover, you need to consider whether that is recommended. It's not needed for those with mild bleeding disorders or those on maintenance dose of Hemlibra. For others, you can consult the Patient's Comprehensive Care Centre or look at the website from the National Coagulation Centre. Factor replacement therapy for inherited coagulopathies should be given on the day of vaccination prior to the injection. Those people on anticoagulants are not at a higher risk of bleeding complications following vaccination. If they're on warfarin, they can be vaccinated if their INR is less than 4. If it's 4 or more, you should follow the advice of the clinical practice and wait until the INR is less than 4 for them to be vaccinated. There is guidance on the technique for intramuscular injections in people with bleeding disorders or on anticoagulants in Chapter 2 of the Immunization Guidelines. There is currently no data available to establish the vaccine safety and efficacy in those who are immunosuppressed. They weren't included in the trials. However, those with immunosuppression due to disease or treatment can be vaccinated if they have no contraindications, because the benefits of the vaccine outweigh any potential risks. Those who have planned immunosuppressive therapy should ideally complete the vaccination 2 weeks before treatment. And as mentioned previously, the recommended minimum interval may be used. Co-administration with other vaccines has not been studied, so it is recommended that you leave an interval of 14 days between any COVID vaccine and other vaccines. Again, interchangeability with other COVID vaccines has not been studied. So you should not use Vaxzevria to complete another course of vaccine if a previous vaccine has been given. However, it is worth noting that there are studies currently ongoing looking at the safety and efficacy of giving one dose of one type of vaccine with another dose of other type of vaccine. So information on this interchangeability is likely to be published and considered soon. Other adverse events that have been reported post-licensure relate particularly to anaphylaxis. Over 20 million doses of this vaccine have now been administered, and there were a small number of cases of anaphylaxis initially reported. These occurred within 30 minutes and were more commonly seen in people with previous histories of allergies and anaphylaxis. As a result, NIAC revised the observation time post-vaccination for all COVID-19 vaccines. So anybody without a history of anaphylaxis from any cause should remain for observation for 15 minutes. Somebody with a history of anaphylaxis from any cause, and that is a serious systemic allergic reaction requiring medical intervention, should remain on site for 30 minutes. And anybody who develops immediate itching, swelling, or an urticarial reaction at the vaccination site should remain for 30 minutes or longer, as clinically indicated. Post-vaccination advice has also been revised in view of the very rare risk of thromboembolic events. Vaccine recipients are advised to seek medical attention if they develop any of the following symptoms: shortness of breath, chest pain, leg swelling, persistent abdominal pain, severe or persistent headaches, particularly 3 or more days after vaccination, blurred vision, petechiae or ecchymosis beyond the site of vaccination. And you should advise the vaccinated person before they leave the site of vaccination of these symptoms and to be aware of them, and that they usually occur within 2 weeks of vaccination. Healthcare professionals are also advised to seek early expert advice from the National Coagulation Centre for any of these very rare thromboembolic events with thrombocytopenia. Because if these individuals receive the correct treatment, they can be promptly diagnosed and treated, and the outcome can be very positive. The vaccine effectiveness studies that have happened since the vaccines have been licensed include many studies from the UK where this vaccine has been widely used. In a prospective population study from Scotland of over 5.4 million people, first dose effectiveness of Vaxzevria was demonstrated at 94%. So what that means is it reduced the risk of a person going into hospital by 94%, 28 to 34 days after the first dose of vaccine. Very, very high effectiveness, and that is something that has really led to the decrease in severe COVID-19 in the UK. We don't know how long the vaccine protection will last, and there are clinical trials ongoing to see how long it will last. Nevertheless, we know that vaccine recipients are not fully protected until 15 days after the second dose. We don't know how long the protection will last thereafter, which is why it is very important that you inform the vaccinee they should follow all current public health guidance to protect themselves and others. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Kenneth Beattie, one of the doctors in the HSE's National Immunisation Office. And today I'm going to talk to you about Module 2, which outlines some clinical trial data and vaccine recommendations for the Mrna COVID-19 vaccine. As an overview of this presentation, we will first discuss some clinical trial data, then move on to contraindications and precautions regarding the vaccine, some clinical considerations, and finally some adverse events that have been reported. Firstly, if we look at the advantages of mRNA vaccines, of which Moderna vaccine is one, they include high potency, the ability for rapid development, the cost-efficient production, the fact that no viral vector is required, which means it can evade any pre-existing immunity the body may have, that the RNA degrades rapidly, and that it does not alter the host's genome. We'll now discuss some phase 3 trial results in which Moderna vaccine was given to trial participants aged 18 and older. As you can see in the graphic below, 14,134 trial participants received 2 doses of Moderna vaccine, with 14,073 participants receiving 2 doses of the placebo. Vaccine efficacy was measured by the COVID-19 occurrence from 14 days after dose 2. We see in the table below that in the group that received 2 doses of the vaccine, 11 cases of systemic COVID-19 infection were recorded, while in the placebo group, 185 cases of systemic COVID-19 infection were recorded. This resulted in a vaccine efficacy of 94% for the Moderna vaccine, which was similar across all age groups. I will now discuss some of the adverse events from the clinical trials, which were reported from over 15,185 vaccine recipients. As you can see from the table below, the most commonly reported adverse events were pain at the injection site, fatigue, headache, myalgia or muscle pains and chills, arthralgia or bone pain and chills, as well as some slightly less common adverse events like fever and injection site redness and swelling. Very uncommon and rare adverse events such as itchiness and rash over the injection site were also reported, and in rare cases a non-permanent acute peripheral facial paralysis known as Bell's palsy was also reported. Adverse events were more commonly reported after dose 2 than after dose 1. They were more commonly reported in younger vaccine recipients than in older recipients. They were usually mild or moderate in intensity and resolved within a few days after vaccination. Some history to the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. The FDA granted, in America, granted emergency use authorization for the COVID-19 Moderna vaccine on December 18, 2020. In Europe, the EU granted conditional marketing authorization on the 6th of January 2021, and this was to be used in patients aged 18 and older, and the vaccine was first used in Ireland on the 16th of January 2021. It's important to note that none of the studies evaluated the effectiveness of Moderna against asymptomatic infection or carriage of COVID-19. So just some description around the vaccine itself. It comes in a multi-dose clear glass vial. It's important to recognize that no dilution is required. If more than 10.5 ml doses can be safely and accurately withdrawn from a diluted vial, they can be used as valid doses. And latex and preservatives are not incorporated in the vaccine. So dosage and interval between the doses. It is advised that 2 doses of 0.5 ml of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine is given intramuscularly with an interval of 28 days between the doses. The minimum interval between the first and second dose is 24 days. If the interval between the first and second doses is less than 24 days, no further dose is needed, but it's important to inform the vaccinee, and there's no evidence of efficacy of doses given before 24 days. If the interval lies between 24 and 27 days, no further action is needed, as it is within the minimum interval. and evidence from trial data is that this is a valid vaccine. If the interval is longer than 28 days, you should give the second dose at whatever interval. The course does not need to be restarted. Some contraindications to the Mrna COVID-19 vaccine include anaphylaxis following a previous dose of the vaccine or any of its constituents, including polyethylene glycol, known as PEG. And anaphylaxis is a serious systemic allergic reaction requiring medical intervention. Some precautions relating to the Mrna COVID-19 vaccine. If a person is suffering from an acute severe febrile illness, it is advised to defer the vaccine until the patient has recovered, but there's no need to check temperature. It's important to seek advice from a relevant specialist for a person with a history of an immediate allergic reaction to any other vaccine, injectable therapy, or polysorbate 80 due to possibility of cross-reactivity with PEG. It's not contraindicated for those with persisting post-COVID-19 symptoms unless that person has had a recent clinical deterioration. Precautions will be in place to minimize injury from fainting, and appropriate support in case of anaphylaxis or fainting after vaccine administration will also be in place. So vaccination after COVID-19 infection. It is advised to defer vaccination until clinical recovery from a COVID-19 infection, and the vaccination should be deferred for at least 4 weeks after diagnosis or onset of symptoms, and 4 weeks from the first PCR positive specimen, if asymptomatic. If the patient is under 65 years and not immunocompromised, it may be deferred for up to 6 months after diagnosis or symptom onset, or from the first PCR or antigen positive specimen. Regarding pregnancy, breastfeeding and fertility, there is limited experience with the use of Mrna COVID-19 vaccine in pregnant women, but animal studies do not indicate direct or indirect harmful effects. The National Immunisation Advisory Committee in Ireland recommends vaccine use where the risk-benefit ratio is favourable. Pregnant women at high risk of severe disease and healthcare workers should discuss the risks and benefits of COVID-19 vaccines with their obstetrician or GP. It is advised that vaccination is not commenced before 14 weeks gestation and should be completed by 36 weeks gestation. This is as a precaution to minimize any possible association with miscarriage or differential diagnosis of a post-vaccination pyrexia. It can be given to women who are breastfeeding as per their priority group. And to date, there is no data on human fertility, but animal studies do not indicate harmful effects from COVID-19 Mrna vaccine. Also, there is no biologically plausible reason why this vaccine would affect fertility. Regarding bleeding disorders in patients who are due to receive the Mrna COVID-19 vaccine, it is important to inform the recipient that there is a risk of hematomas in IM injection sites, and it is advised to consult the supervising consultant for patients with thrombocytopenia, that is a platelet count of less than 50 by 10 to the 9 per litre. Regarding the need for hemostatic cover, this is not needed for mild bleeding disorders or for patients on maintenance dose of emicizumab, also known as Hemlibra. For all others, it is advised to see the link below or to contact the patient's comprehensive care centre. In patients who receive factor replacement therapy for inherited coagulopathies, it is advised that this is given on the day of the vaccination prior to the injection. Regarding the use of anticoagulants, there is not a higher risk of bleeding complications following vaccination. If a patient is on warfarin, they can be safely vaccinated if their INR is less than 4. If the INR is 4 or more, it is important to follow the advice of the clinic or practice and wait until the INR is less than 4 to be vaccinated. A description of the technique for intramuscular injections in persons with bleeding disorders or on anticoagulants is available at the link below. Regarding use of Mrna COVID-19 vaccine in children, the vaccine is recommended in persons 16 years of age and older. There is limited data at present on the safety and efficacy of this vaccine in younger children. However, clinical trials are ongoing to address this concern. Regarding immunosuppressed patients, no data are currently available to establish vaccine safety and efficacy in these groups. Patients with immunosuppression due to disease or treatment may be vaccinated if they have no contraindications to the vaccine. Should a patient have a planned immunosuppressive therapy, it is advised that vaccination is completed 2 weeks before treatment. Regarding co-administration of Mrna COVID-19 vaccine with other vaccines, this has not been studied. Current advice is to leave an interval of 14 days between any COVID-19 vaccine and any other vaccine that may be received. Regarding interchangeability of Mrna COVID-19 vaccine with other COVID-19 vaccines, again, this has not been studied either. It is advised that you do not use an alternative COVID-19 vaccine to complete the course once commenced on the Mrna COVID-19 vaccine regime. So some adverse events that have been recorded in the use of Mrna vaccine in the general population. In total, over 77 million doses have been administered, and the safety profile is as expected. A small number of cases of anaphylaxis have been reported in the United States, and this rate is at 2.5 cases per million, which is slightly higher than in other vaccines. Symptoms in these cases tended to present within 30 minutes and were more common in patients with previous histories of allergies or of anaphylaxis. Regarding the observation time post-Mrna vaccination, in patients with no history of anaphylaxis from any cause, they are observed for 15 minutes post-vaccine. In patients with a history of anaphylaxis from any cause, they are observed for 30 minutes post-vaccination. And in patients with an immediate itching, swelling, or urticarial reaction at the vaccination site, they are observed for 30 minutes or longer as clinically indicated. Regarding vaccine effectiveness in the general population, in the United States, the Centers for Disease Control have studied 4,000 healthcare and essential workers who have received the COVID-19 Mrna vaccine. They underwent weekly SARS-CoV testing for 13 consecutive weeks post-vaccination. The measure of vaccine effectiveness was at 14 days or more after the second dose, and the study noted that the vaccine was 90% effective against SARS-CoV-2 infections at this time frame. Regarding the duration of protection post the Mrna COVID-19 vaccine, it's important to state that vaccine recipients may not be protected until 14 days after they've received their second dose. Clinical trials are ongoing to determine the length of protection from the vaccine. However, it's important to inform the vaccinee that they may not be protected until 14 days after the second dose, and for that reason, they should follow all current public health guidance, including social distancing, hand washing, and wearing of face coverings to protect themselves and others after vaccination.